All right, everyone, welcome back. I did a short intro on our director of marketing, Denis Stranjak, and I am super happy to have him here. I very honestly and forthrightly learn every day working with Denis. He's got tremendous amount of knowledge, and he's a close personal friend. And I'm overjoyed that we get to have him here at LGS C2, because in terms of information for how to get your store out in front of your audience, wherever they are, Denis is just an absolute goldmine. And as I said, over the last 6 months, I think it's 6 months. I'd have to look at the actual CMO report. Denis has been responsible for the highest revenue months in the history of Channel Fireball. His marketing efforts have helped us grow and grow and grow. And so I'm excited and happy to have him share some of that information and knowledge with all of you. He's got an excellent deck. We can have that sent out to everyone who attends. You know, if you signed up that marketplace interest sheet, we'll have that sent out to you. But here you are, our director of marketing at the CFB Group, Denis Stranjak.
That was I feel like you oversold my intro, but I'll take it. Thanks a lot, Machi.
Welcome.
Morning, everybody, or I should say evening, actually. We're hopping from the back end of things to the marketing side. We're also hopping 8 hours into the future. It is 6 p.m. here, so good evening from my perspective. I'm going to share my screen here. Just make sure I share the right one. I'm pretty sure it's this one. Bingo, bango, bongo. There we go. So yeah, like what you said, I've been working over Channel Fireball for a couple of years now. And before that, I was over on CFB events on the event side of things. So if you've been to a Grand Prix or a Magic Fest or a Command Fest in the last couple of years, you've either interacted with something I worked on or possibly personally seen me sprinting across a hall to put out some sort of fire somewhere else. But like I said, today I'm going to talk about some of the things you can do to market your store. And if any of you have done a business course or a marketing course, a lot of this stuff will sound familiar to you. But in my experience, in all the stores I've worked with, and even the people in Channel Fireball, people get into this industry because they are passionate about it. Everyone I know who owns a game store in Ireland or over in the US, it's because they love Magic the Gathering, or they love Warhammer, or they love Yu-Gi-Oh! And they want to share that love and that product with people who are interested in it. And that's how they get into it. And the overheads and the business side of things tends to come afterwards. So I think honestly, that's one of the strongest things about our industry, is that it is built by people who are passionate and care about it a lot. Now, what that means is there's a lot of very low hanging fruit and a lot of things you can do to get a lot of bang for a very small amount of buck. And by buck, in this case, I literally mean a very small amount of time. So the way we're going to approach things today is talking about 3 sort of pillars of things, which is understanding, strategy, and execution. So understanding is sort of gathering knowledge and trying to think about who your customers are, what products you offer them, things like that. Strategy is figuring out what you can do to leverage that, what you can do to deliver the message you're looking to deliver to the people you want to deliver it to. And execution is actually going through and doing that. And in terms of what we're going to actually talk about today, we're talking about customer research and something called buyer personas, which we'll get to in a little minute. Strategy, you're talking about business models and value proposition canvases and things like that. And execution could be anything. It could be social media, it could be email, it could be in-store, it could be events. Today, I'm going to focus on the digital side of things, particularly social media and email, mostly because that's where a lot of my experience lies. It's also where a lot of, unfortunately, everyone's experience lies in the last year selling these products, but the execution really does go all the way down to, which products go where in your store, how you stack your products, all that kind of stuff. It is all like frontage is everything. It is top to bottom, percolates through every part of the experience. So the first thing I want to talk about is really thinking about who your customers really are. And this question does appear facetious at first glance. Understanding your customers is the first step to knowing how to engage with them. And this is a big hiccup. It's important to try and set aside any preconceptions or assumptions about your audience and try to approach these exercises we're going to talk about today as objectively as possible. It is very easy to think, I know all the Magic players that come to my store. I know what they're like, or, oh, my store doesn't really do Yu-Gi-Oh!, that kind of thing. And like what John and Mosh talked about in the previous section, diversification is so important and so essential. And that expands beyond sales channels and products. Diversifying the way you think about the people who come to your store and shop at your store is important. Try to put yourself in the customer's shoes and think about why they buy the products they buy and what motivates them. And that second one's really important. And we'll get to that in a little minute here as well. So the tool we use to do this is something called a buyer persona, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. If you're Magic players, Wizards uses things called psychographics, which are basically the same thing, to talk about the way different players enjoy Magic the Gathering. Spikes play Magic for competitive reasons. Timmy's play Magic as a fun social thing, generally speaking, that kind of thing. And they're an exercise that give you the terms and the language you need to be able to discuss your customers with your staff and anyone who works in the store but also internally and the way you think about them. They give you a codified way to view the different segments of your audience. Like I said, you likely have a pretty good understanding of your customers and their wants and their needs. But putting pen to paper forces you to think about it in a different way. It forces you to bring it from your subconscious mind at the back of your head to the forefront, and you'd be amazed at how much you learn by putting a structure on the way you think about these things. Something I ran into, and I worked with a couple of stores talking about things like this over here in Ireland and over in the US as well. The more you think you don't need things like buyer personas, these tools, the more you do need them and the more you can gain from them, I promise you. So the things to consider when building one of these is what products the consumer buys, this subsection of consumers, how do they interact with their interests? So what I mean by that, and that's kind of tied to the next point, do they have a WhatsApp group that they text their friends about? You know, if they're passionate about the next Warhammer game. Do they have a Discord where they all play D&D together? Those kinds of things. Where they consume the content or social media and what they actually use it for. Do they read articles about magic on channelfireball.com? Do they watch YouTube show? Do they listen to D&D podcasts, things like that? What motivates their purchase decisions? And this is honestly the most important one. It is very tempting to think that people buy magic cards because they like Magic the Gathering. And Mashi, I'm sure, is going to be delighted to hear me mention this. Is a book by a man called Donald Miller called Story Brand. And in that, he talks about what's the way you present your brand to different consumers. And it's all about the flip side of that is it's about the stories you tell yourselves. I don't play Magic because I like collecting Magic cards. I play Magic because I like interacting with my friends. I play Magic because I want to become a professional Magic player. I buy Warhammer products because I like having a trophy case full of painted miniatures. I play D&D because I like storytelling, or it's a creative outlet, any of that things. People don't, there's a surface level, there's a version of themselves that these people see themselves as that they're trying to get to through your product. The next thing we'll talk about is doing a very simple deal maker, deal breaker analysis. And this is really, if you boil this theory down all the way, this is what you get. What can you offer this person or what experience does your store offer them that makes them guaranteed to become a customer, and what absolutely turns them off so hard that they would never want to come and purchase anything from you ever again. And then all that funnels down to basically their ideal product. So I'm going to share some real examples with you from our genuine buyer personas that we made at Channel Fireball a couple of years ago. So you have to remember that these are from Channel Fireball. So this is a online, primarily Magic the Gathering retailer at the time with a robust content offer. So I'm going to show you two actual buyer personas from an old deck that I used to have, and you'll notice from some of the words in there, it might give you an idea of when the date of this was. So we have Social Susie, for example, whose favorite formats are things like Commander and Draft. Their goal is to collect rare and or old cards and to socialize with their friends. The type of content they consume is not necessarily very much. They are, like I mentioned just a minute ago, they're using Magic the Gathering as an avenue to communicate and interact with their friends. The platforms they might do that on digitally are Facebook groups or Discord, things that are focused around communicating with each other rather than these monodirectional platforms like Twitch or YouTube. A deal breaker for them might be an overly competitive environment in your store, or in our case, it might be overly competitive content on channelfireball.com. And a deal maker would be a good deal that lets them have fun with their friends. Like I said, we're thinking about this in the perspective of an online retailer, whereas for you, it might be a casual Friday event. It might be a Commander thing every Saturday night. It might be just not letting people be participating in fostering an overly competitive atmosphere, just letting it have a fun, chill vibe, honestly. And the ideal product we were talking about at the time was a draft baller box, which is something which is a package we would send out to customers, which would let them play at home with 7 of their friends and had all the accessories and things like that. Or new Commander decks, because Commander tends to be a much more social type of way to play the game, mostly because there's much more politics, much more talking involved. And the goal of a Commander game, for at least a certain subject of the people who play it, is to have fun together, not necessarily to win the game. If you want to flip all the way to the opposite side of the spectrum, we can talk about competitive Kathy, whose favorite formats are Standard, Pioneer, that's a name I've not heard in a long time, and Modern, which is a name I've not honestly heard in even a longer time. And their goals might be to get to the Pro Tour or get to the MPL or anything like that, or whatever this ends up looking in 12 or 18 or 24 months. The content they might consume could be articles, it could be YouTube videos, it could be Twitch, it could be podcasts. This is that monodirectional content we were talking about before that people are not necessarily as likely to consume when it comes to socializing. Platforms kind of reflects that: Twitch, Twitter, Discord. The deal breaker for them is cards out of stock or too slow. They could be upset about the paywall for content, or they could not be located in the United States. A lot of games, and this was the case of Magic Gathering at the time, focus their competitive efforts in the United States. So you could be upset about that if that was a blocker for you. A deal maker for them could be the value out of CFB Pro Plus, which was an offering we had where you would get free store credit every month, or high-level strategy content that they could learn. And the ideal product for them would probably be CFB Pro. So you can take this approach, and we're going to do it a little bit now in a second with another example, and think about the different people who come to your store. You will need to make a buyer persona for every segment of your customer base, separated by their motivations, their products, and demographics and things. But you don't need to worry about being exhaustive here. I don't think anybody should go away from this and be like, all right, I got a bunch of homework, trying to make a 30-page binder with all this information in it. Even just thinking about this differently and listening, we talked about it, will do a lot of that for you, honestly, will get you into the right mindset. There's a couple of tips and traps about this. When you really do make an effort to consider every possible segment, include your staff in your discussion if you have a larger store, or use Facebook groups like we have a CFB Marketplace group that you're welcome to join, even if you're not actually interested in the marketplace or planning to go up there to compare notes to other stores. And talk about, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about, D&D players, or think about Magic players, et cetera, like that. Include seasonal customers as well. There are likely plenty of customers you have in November, in December, around the holidays, around Black Friday, that are not year-round, but they are still very important. And try to understand not just what someone purchases, but why they purchase it. What goal or need are they trying to fulfill? And this is what I was talking about when you have this version of yourself who is happier or more successful or makes more money by winning tournaments, and what you are trying to aspire to, and have the products and services you buy and consume try to connect you to that. Don't conflate your interests with your priorities. If you like Magic the Gathering, but you have more Pokemon TCG customers, you are primarily a Pokemon store, and you are leaving opportunities on the table, not acknowledging that. Don't approach the exercise with a jaded attitude. You aren't doing it to learn new things necessarily as much as you are learning a new way of thinking about the same things. All customers are important, and it is important not to, throw anyone to the side, but some can be a higher priority. But you should work to consider and grow each cohort openly. If you think you have a very small Pokemon audience, or a very small Flesh and Blood or Warhammer or whatever, it is very important to understand that you have a very small audience in those games right now. A couple of years ago, Channel Fireball, back when I made the deck I just showed you, we didn't sell any Pokemon cards really. And now Pokemon makes up a huge amount of the business that we do. It's important to think outside the box. And this is something I referenced just now. It's not just about regulars. Adults buying gifts for their children or nieces or nephews, they'll benefit from a straightforward purchasing experience and a little bit of a personal touch, both online and in store. These are the kind of people that when they come in and they look, befuddled at the massive amounts of colorful Pikachus and stuff on the wall, you can actually come up to them and say, hey, do you need a hand? And they'll actually probably say yes. Different games cater to different clientele. And this changes region to region as well. Some are looking for a place to hang out. Some are looking for something to take home. Card game players versus board game or tabletop RPG players. And like Masha mentioned in the last section, there you could make a fortune off of selling cans of soda to people sitting there playing D&D for 6 hours at a time. That's a whole other business model. They might not even bought the D&D starter set from you in the first place. So how do you actually utilize this information? You can use this to inform how you interact with customers in store. You can make adjustments to the events or launches you have planned. Like I said, if you think that there's a lot of Commander players and you don't have a Commander event on Sundays, or if you don't have a lot of Commander players and you want to look to grow that, you can use that to sort of inform that. You can adapt the copy on your website or your social media posts, and your knowledge of your customers should be consistently present throughout your entire strategy. Every method of interaction you have with someone, and that includes the social media posts you make, the emails you send, how you greet people when they come in, the stuff you choose to put at the front of the store versus the back of the store. There's a reason grocery stores have the bread and milk at the back. It's so you have to go through it all the way to pass by everything else to get to it. That kind of thing applies exactly the same in a game store. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a value proposition canvas. And this is sort of the next logical step in the buyer persona. So if you have these buyer personas that you've constructed about what your audience is and who these people are, it's now time to sort of look inward and see how you can connect what you do as a business and as a store to these people and their needs. It was developed by a man called Alexander Osterwalder, and it exists to bring structure to the relationship between customer and company by identifying pain points and desires and what your services and products have to offer those pain points and desires. It is a subsection of a much more complex business model canvas that we're not going to go into in depth today, because here's why. It looks like this. And this is a much bigger, if you have a business manager or anything like that, I'm sure they have shown you something like this before. You can find these for free on websites like strategizer.com. But this is a roadmap for your entire company: relationships, sales channels, revenue streams, cost structure, overheads, all that stuff. I want to take a little chunk out of this, specifically the customer relationships and value propositions chunk, and blow it up to get to the value proposition canvas. So the way this works here is the store is on the left-hand side and the customer's on the right-hand side. The customer has goals that they want to achieve, and the store has products or services they offer. The customer has gains, and the store has gain creators, and the customer has pains, and the store has pain relievers. I don't know why I talked through that. There's a labeled version of it on the next slide. This is basically what we're talking about. This version of it uses customer jobs. I much prefer to think of it as goals, because of what I was talking about earlier. When people consume things, they are trying to become a version of themselves. You don't buy a lawnmower because you need to mow your lawn. You buy a lawnmower because you want to be a person that has a mowed lawn. The example I want to use here is apparently Cassius Marsh, but more specifically Commander Carl, which is another psychograph that we had that I didn't actually include here. So let's imagine a casual Magic the Gathering player, most interested in playing Commander. And like I said, I'm using Magic the Gathering as an example here because it's the game that I'm the most familiar with of the ones that we sell. And I think it's also the one that it's relatively ubiquitous. Let's say they play the game for social reasons rather than for competitive reasons. And they like brewing decks with weird, unusual cards and looking for a fun hangout kind of vibe. And they want to make new friends playing Commander. Maybe they moved to the city recently, or they just started going to school here, and this is what they're looking for. So let's blow up their half of the value proposition canvas. The gains they're looking for, things that make them happy, are things like a wide selection of singles, including older cards. They want the latest Commander products to be available. They want regular Commander events in the store. The pains, things that bother them, are that maybe there isn't a very big Commander play group present in the store. Maybe the store is mostly focused on Pokemon cards, not Magic the Gathering cards, or maybe it's Warhammer or anything like that. Let's say they aren't interested. Let's say they're interested in board games, but their store doesn't have necessarily a very big selection. And that kind of hop is relatively normal. This is why it's important to think about why people play the things they do. Commander players are much more likely to come in one day and get bored and pick up a copy of Betrayal at House on the Hill than the modern players are, because of the reasons they play the game. And the goals they want to do is they want to express themselves by building weird and creative decks. They want to have a fun place to hang out and play Commander, and they want to make friends through a local Commander play group. And now if you flip to the other side of things, we can think about us as a business, as a simulacrum of your store. What can we offer them for that? So the products and services that we have, obviously we have Magic the Gathering products for sale. We can have Commander events on the calendar, and we can be fostering a hangout-friendly space for all players. The gains would be maintaining a wide selection of the most popular Commander cards, and we'll be being clear with customers about pre-orders and allocations of Commander products. If they want the latest things as soon as possible, you need to let them know that they got to order 3 weeks early or whatever, so you can get them from your distributor, things like that. The pain relievers is having introductory Magic the Gathering events, including Commander, not just for them so that they feel comfortable when they first arrive, but also to try and actively grow the community that will attract these sorts of people. A suggestion box, either in person or online, for board games people might want to order. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the local game stores here in Dublin and asked, "Oh, do you have this game? Do you have this game? Do you have this game?" And they'll say, "No, they can order it." And you can make a ton of sales by just putting up a cardboard box with a slit in the top, where people can write in that they want to get Betrayal at House on the Hill or Catan or the expansion for Catan or whatever, or, Scythe or anything like that. Similarly, a board game demo night. So this kind of has like a Field of Dreams feel to it, and like if you build it, they will come kind of way. If you are upset because you don't have a certain cohort of players, like Pokemon players don't come to my store, for example, like that, you need to give them those things. You need to put the honey out there for the flies to come, essentially. Trying to think about how you interact with all of your different customer segments. Again, you can be pretty exhaustive with this. You don't need to get too bogged down in it. Some of the tips you want to think about are trying to adapt your value proposition canvas to as many of your buyer personas as possible. There will come a time when it's not worth it. There'll come a time when you're talking about the 2% to the 1%, and it's probably not worth your time to spend too much brain power thinking about it. But generally speaking, you should try and be as comprehensive about it as you can. Where you don't have services that satisfy specific customers' goals, try to explore what you could do or offer to meet that need. You can pivot too. Again, you can take a step back. If this person's looking for Commander cards, but you don't have, let's say you don't have the liquidity to buy up a bunch of Commander inventory in the hopes that somebody might buy it, think about why they want the Commander cards. They want the Commander cards so they can play Commander with other Commander players. That is the same itch as having a board game night, for example, or having a new drafters night, that kind of thing. Those sorts of, like, you should try and figure out why people want the things they want and address the wants rather than the actual specific products they're looking for. And lastly, try to think outside the box. Even if you think certain customers are satisfied with your offerings and your services, that does not mean there isn't room for improvement, adaptation, or expansion. Every store, every business, every individual, to be honest, can be doing things better. And it is important to always approach things with that mindset. The traps are kind of, largely speaking, the inverse. Try to be open-minded. Don't take pain points too personally, and be honest about the shortcomings and areas of improvement for your store. No local game store is perfect, and it's certainly not perfect for every customer. Don't be like, oh, well, of course I don't have, all these singles. I'm not a big wig like these other companies, or of course I don't have Warhammer. It's way too expensive for me to stock these things, yada, yada, yada. Don't think about it like that. Try to be honest and try to be realistic and try to address them. Don't focus on only product offerings and services. Less tangible factors like community, vibe, cleanliness, frontage. These are also really important to consider. They're much less concrete, obviously, and you can't bring your distributor and ask them if they can bring you, a better in-store experience in 2 weeks. But it is very, very important to the first impression that people have when they first come to your store. And then be careful not to over-focus on your core audience. It'll make you lean into your preconceptions about them, and it'll stifle your growth into other players and games. I want to talk a little bit about social media because it's a very primary way for most stores to promote their products and re-engage their audiences. But even to this day, I see plenty of stores with little to no Twitter or Facebook or anything presence whatsoever. Social media is essential for promoting your store, especially platforms that are focused on text-based content that are easier to make, like Facebook and Twitter, like I just mentioned. You do not need to be a professional copywriter or a photographer or a social media manager. You can get a long way with just a little bit of prep time and a little bit of forethought. Talk about Facebook, for example. Managing your Facebook business page properly is very, very important. It could be the first way many people interact with your store, and you have to approach it the same way you would your shop window. And as we all know, this has become even more important in the last year when people have been forced to sell more and more things online than they wouldn't usually or ordinarily. It's important to ensure all your information is accurate. Opening hours, address, including directions if necessary, website, email, phone number, all that stuff. And then this is the part that most people hate. A proper cadence for posting on Facebook is essential for maintaining sales and growth. I'm going to talk now about a store that I actually frequent personally, genuinely, in real life. I'm going to use as a case study and their Facebook page to talk about some of the things that you can do to improve your presence on there. So I go to a store called the War Chest, and this is genuinely my local game store. It is a very small store in Ireland that focuses on card games, board games, and some tabletop RPG products. Their Facebook presence is by no means perfect, but it is a very good example of many of the best practices that most stores should be following. And like I said at the start of the presentation, it is a lot of very easy, very low-hanging fruit. If you see anything in here in the next couple of slides that you think you can do, it is definitely worth updating them on your store's Facebook page. So they got a nice big banner, they got a nice app, they got the nice, the very clear, concise name for the store, and then you have the information bar over here on the left. I've broken this all out. It'll be laid out a little bit differently if you go to an actual Facebook page. They have directions located next to Hardy's Bar between the AIB and Bank of Ireland in Dunleary. It's an advanced WPN store, home, that's all tagline there, and then all the likes that people have checked in there, the website. They have a messenger integration right there. Just message them immediately. Their email, their store hours, their category, all that stuff is accurate, is up to date, is concise. If you confuse anybody when they first come to your store, and all these heuristics can be transferred over to your website as well. Confusion is the death of conversion. You'll never ever, like, if people come there and they find mismatching information, or they struggle to find for what they're looking for maybe more than 2 or 3 seconds, you will lose them every single time. So Facebook is an excellent customer service opportunity. Facebook Messenger is an excellent way, particularly on mobile, to interact with potential and existing customers. And this little section I have on the left is built using automated responses feature that you have in your Facebook Business Manager. And you can tailor this to your store. If people are asking often if you do deliveries, or if they're asking when modern F&M starts, this is a great way to preload those answers in. You see here they have, can you recommend something for me? How much do your products cost? What's popular at the moment? Can someone assist me? Bear in mind, this is more likely to be for first-time customers than it is for regulars. Regulars will, learn these things and start to ask each other, but This is the cohort we're talking about, where this is the mom coming in November trying to buy Pokemon cards for her son, which doesn't know anything about it. Then we can start talking about selling on Facebook. You can actually use Facebook as a sales channel. And if you're a Binder Pass customer and you have, if you use Shopify, Facebook is a sales channel you can use integrated there. It does have its own integrated selling platform that you can add products to manually, or like I said, you can sync. It is worth noting that Facebook will take a 5% cut from each sale. This might not make it worth listing certain items on there, and it is not necessarily a good fit for all stores. And there are some advantages beyond the added visibility. Customers can check out very quickly and very easily without ever leaving Facebook. It's a very, very quick, very seamless experience. So next I want to talk about, and like I mentioned, this is definitely the least favorite part of the presentation for anybody, which is posting on Facebook. Many store owners dread the task of writing fun or interesting social media posts, but you don't need to worry. Your social media posting strategy only needs to be one thing. It needs to be consistent. Quantity, or specifically consistency, is much more important than quality, generally speaking. And there are plenty of tools you can use to ease the burden of having to post regularly on your store's Facebook page. Schedule your posts. Facebook Business Manager has plenty of tools for scheduling and managing the content you post, but there are better ones out there even for free. Buffer is a tool we use at Channel Firewall to manage all of our social media interactions. It's an excellent tool. Its free version is pretty extensive, and that will let you schedule posts for both Facebook and Twitter, as well as other platforms. And it is an absolute game changer. You should aim to post at least once a day on each platform. And this means you should probably just sit down on a Sunday night or a Monday morning, or in reality, if you're managing a game store, at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday when there doesn't happen to be anybody there, and just bang out 5 or 6 of these posts and just stay ahead of it all. Look up what products are coming out. We're going to take a look at some example posts now in just a second about the kind of things you can actually start using to, instill some conversation, things like that. Start thinking about how you can fit this into your routine, because this will probably only take you, I would say, 30 or 40 minutes a week, and it'll probably be the biggest return you have on the time you put in terms of what you do to actually promote your store. So again, I pulled these from the War Chests page. The poster on the left is just talking about an upcoming D&D release, and that is available for pre-order. Very, very straightforward. Here, we're going to be selling this thing soon. If you'd like to buy it, let me know. Anybody knows that you need to be posting these kind of things on Facebook. But when I talk about consistency and quantity over quality, I talk about things like this post on the right, in which they've just shared a post from Will Wheaton about Wingspan, which is just a post about board games, just to do with the industry, with the passion, with the hobby, not selling anything. No one's going to read this post and then go and buy a box of Modern Horizons from you. But what it does do is 2 things. It keeps your sort of logo and your Facebook presence in their brain as they scroll past it. Those timeline inches are so important. That's why consistency and frequency of posting are so essential. And Facebook and the algorithm rewards consistent posting. The only thing any of these algorithms care about, for be it Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Twitch, the only thing they care about is keeping you on the platform as long as humanly possible. And more consistent posts are more likely to foster more interaction. They're more likely to come back to visit that page, etc. All these things feed into what the algorithm is looking for. And this means posting consistently when you're served to your audience much more often. On the left here again, a very direct sales post. Now accepting pre-orders on the next week Magic the Gathering release, Modern Horizons 2. Some prices, please click here to view products straight to the Facebook page to check out. On the right-hand side, check out the Last Chancellor's digital convention coming up the end of March, a day of RPGs, board games, and fun for traditional gamers. It's just another post about an event. Not an event that they're selling at, not an event that they're affiliated with anyway, just a hobby thing. There's so much news in Pokemon, Flesh and Blood, Magic the Gathering, Digimon, Dragon Ball, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons, comic books. You will never be short of content. The bottleneck will never be things to post about. It'll only be your willingness to do it and your creativity and figuring out how to do it. Next up, I want to take a look at some of the photos from the Facebook page. And these are a great example of the things you should definitely be doing in your store when it comes to actually posting stuff. These are all photos of players. The top 2 are photos of the top left picture here is just a release event with like 30 something odd players in it. The top right is 2 players who won playmats in a Yu-Gi-Oh event. The bottom right, I mean, if you can get your players to pose for a photo like that, that's a massive one, obviously, is giving away a game day playmat back when Amon came out. On the bottom left is when one of the store regulars ended up winning a Grand Prix as part of a team. Building community is essential. Your store should not be the star of your Facebook page or its content. The players are the stars of the Facebook page and the content and the messaging. Use your platform to highlight them, to make them feel like part of something, and to help foster a sense of belonging. This is how you build loyalty and lifelong customers much more effectively than just charging 50 cents less for a rare compared to the store 2 blocks away. Players, yes, are looking for a good deal, but more than that, they're looking for a good experience. And I have shopped at many places that are more expensive than other places because I like the experience there. And that's tons of things. It's the way the store looks, how clean it is, how friendly the staff are, the variety of products, how easy the checkout process is online or even in person. But also this, how much I feel like I am a person that attends the store and I am rewarded for that. I am recognized for that. In terms of Twitter, your strategy for Twitter, your Twitter account should be broadly the same as your Facebook page. But you should know that people are much more likely to interact with your posts rather than the profile of the page itself. Twitter is much more about just staying in your feed and commenting and retweeting and replying than it is actually hopping between different things. Facebook is much more transient in that sense. For businesses in general, especially physical stores, Twitter is probably less important than Facebook. But like I mentioned, with tools like Buffer, it costs you very little to cross-post your content with very minimal editing. And like I said, if you take 20 or 30 or 40 minutes a week, I promise you they'll be the best spent and most lucrative 40 minutes you could possibly take with your time. Make it part of your routine. Take some time during slow periods to schedule posts ahead of time and check in on messages, notifications, and things like that. Online messages are almost as important as someone walking up to you in store and asking where a particular product is. Treat them accordingly, especially nowadays with retail overall having moved so largely online because of COVID, the pandemic, and things shutting down. Remember the lessons we learned as things start to open back up. Where possible, use photos or videos in your posts. These do not need to be amazing. A modern smartphone is more than effective enough. There was a post a couple of years ago from a Grand Prix in Chiba where they opened a Black Lotus during an unlimited draft. And we happened to catch it on camera. And I got approached asking, oh my God, do you have the file, from the videographer that took that, like what format is it and stuff like that. And I pulled out my phone because I had filmed that video that was massively popular on social media on my Samsung S10 at the time. Modern cameras are modern phone cameras and video cameras are so far above what you need to be posting a picture on Facebook and Twitter that not having a DSLR and not having a tens of $1,000 red camera is not an obstacle anymore. It's not an acceptable excuse for not posting content. And then you should also try and post about and offer comments on news in the communities your products are centered around, like that Will Wheaton post from the War Chest I talked about. Just showing that you're engaged in the community and care about the things your customers care about is important to them personally, and it makes them feel like you understand them. But it is really, at the end of the day, just about getting those posts out and getting the algorithm to understand that you are here every day posting and posting and posting and posting. Some of the traps can be don't bite off more than you can chew. I said you should try and post once a day. That is not a lot, to be honest with you. And I know a lot of you people listening to this, I think I can post way more than that. It is better to post consistently once a day for a month than it is to post 5 times a day for 2 weeks and then miss a week because something came up. Don't worry about over editing or agonizing over the specifics of your posts. Posting is more important than posting well, especially at first. Don't agonize about the copy. Could I have taken this picture with a better light? Don't post, absolute trash content, obviously. But once it's acceptable, you get vastly diminishing returns on fine-tuning it. This will take time to grow, especially if you're starting from scratch. Do not be discouraged at your initial results and really keep at it. And try not to engage with negativity or toxic comments on posts. Simply hide them and move on. The last thing anybody wants to see when they come to a new store on Facebook is seeing them getting into a flame war with someone online. Anybody entering into bad faith discussions is not likely to purchase from your store, and you're not going to convince them by arguing with them in the comments of your Facebook post. All you're going to do is turn actual, real potential customers away. There are some cute things you can do to incentivize growing your Facebook and social media presence. If you want to leverage or kickstart your social media presence, you can do things like giveaways for their followers, your Facebook or Twitter pages, things like that. Companies like Smearl, I think it might be SmyIRL. It's a European company. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But I think there's equivalents in the US, offer in-store physical follower counters like you can see here. and they are incredibly effective at motivating customers to pull out their phones and actually go and like or follow your page. You can put up a piece of paper with a QR code, like scan here to follow our Facebook page. You can do that too. These are worth picking up, especially if you can find them at a good price, because there's something so primitive about the way our brains work that if you see a counter like that and you go, wait a minute, I can pull out on my phone and press a button, that is very non-committal to me. Following a Facebook page doesn't meaningfully change my life. I'm not pulling money out of my wallet. I can follow this Facebook page, and seeing the little rotor click over in the counter is so satisfying. These are an absolute game changer. If you have a physical location that gets a lot of foot traffic, I would really recommend looking into picking up one of these. Like I said, Smearl is a place that offers them, but you can also look up, I'm sure if you look up in-store social media counter or anything like that, you'll be able to get it. There are other social media platforms, obviously, that you can use. Instagram is much more photo centric. That is one where, like I said, your phone is good enough, but there you are going to be competing against photographers, Instagram models, things like that. And you really can't convey a lot of text in your Instagram posts, even in the description. And you can't really link directly out of it. You can only link in your bio. It's good for brand building. And if you're taking photos of the players who are winning events, things like that, it is really good for that, because your Instagram page will just be a collage of those photos. But it is not as easily copyable over when compared to Facebook and Twitter. It is a very different beast altogether. Same goes for TikTok or Snapchat. If you happen to be, moonlighting as an improv comedian and you think you got a good shot at making a bunch of funny gaming TikToks, go for it. Power to you. Same goes for Snapchat. That is not going to be a valuable strategy for 99% of stores. It is not going to be worth your time, and it's a much larger investment than typing up a couple of Facebook posts on a Sunday afternoon. And then the last thing I want to talk about is same goes kind of for YouTube. If you have a podcast, or if you have like a D&D podcast or a gaming podcast, or if you have the setup to actually film gameplay in your store and things like that, that is amazing. And that can be a differentiator, but it is by no means necessary. Like I said, I wanted to focus on this presentation about low-hanging fruit, and that is definitely a little higher up on the tree. Next thing I want to talk about email marketing. Now, email marketing will not make a lot of sense for stores that operate on primarily in-store sales, but any store that is still a store now, a year after the start of the pandemic, it is very likely you have some kind of online presence. It is a very, very valuable tool, though, in terms of collecting information about your customers and being able to contact them about things. It's much more direct than using social media. Mailchimp, for example, is an excellent CRM that lets you have up to 2,000 contacts, and their standard pricing model is only $9.90 a month if you want even more features. So this is a pretty small financial commitment, but it can get you can get a lot out of it. Aim to email your customers if you're going to take email marketing seriously about once a week with product releases, giveaways, and upcoming events. You do not want to be mailing people more than 2, maybe 3 times a week around like Black Friday or whatever at most. That's a little different. You have a newsletter, especially when that includes giveaways. That's an excellent way to farm email addresses from people who aren't already part of your list. And you have to be sure to add a "would you like to hear from us" checkbox to your online checkout, depending on whatever format you're using, especially in GDPR compliant regions. And if you're a store that operates in Europe or has European customers, you'll know what GDPR is. And if you're a store that operates solely inside the US, you probably don't need to worry about it. And I am very jealous of you for not having to worry about it. I mentioned Mailchimp already. There are other, much more robust offerings as well, like Klaviyo and HubSpot, that are really, really useful for taking things to the next level. These are CRM or customer relationship management platforms. And if you're a store that has a lot of high volume sales, especially online, this will let you learn a lot about your customers and target them very effectively. You can think like, okay, I have my pre-order of my allocation of battle styles is coming in. I'm going to email, and battle styles is a bad example because nobody could keep that in stock, but it's something that you wanted to actually try and sell. For example, I'm going to email every single person who's bought a Pokemon product from me within the last 6 months. And if you have high volume sales online, that's probably a pretty big cohort, and you can actually target them like that. You have to be a little clever about how you strategize that, but that is an easy way to try and start segmenting your audience digitally through a full CRM solution. But that's a discussion for another day, because that's much more sort of higher level. And then the main 3 pillars that comes to talking about email marketing is it is to test and learn and to adjust. So some sample titles, very, very simple stuff. It's not to register for our Saturday Pokemon tournament. New Warhammer products in stock, check them out. Other Magic products you might be interested in. With a CRM system, like I said, you can customize emails, remind players, for example, who haven't bought anything in 3 months, and you can send them a discount code. You can set up remarketing from your web store. You can send up automated abandoned cart emails. If someone adds something to their cart but doesn't actually check out, they'll get emailed a day later saying, hey, you left these things in your cart. You can even say, hey, you left these things in your cart. Here's a 5% off code. Product like that, you can do product recommendations as well. And online solutions like Shopify tend to have all of this stuff built in. So this kind of brings us to the end of what I want to talk about today. We have a couple of minutes here left. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Please do feel free to send in more. I'm happy to go through them all. We got a question here. What percentage of posts on Facebook should be selling posts? This is a little bit tricky. This varies a lot from store to store and how your customers respond to that kind of thing. I would say when you're starting, aim for no more than 75%. So if you're posting four posts over the course of 5 or 6 days, maybe make it so that only 3 of them are active selling posts. That being said, it's a little bit different because you're a store. If you're actively selling products to your customers, if you have products you think they're going to be interested in, just list them, to be honest. Just talk about them. That's fine. And you can also hide selling posts as non-selling posts. You can post about how excited you are for Modern Horizons 2 and casually mention at the end that you're taking pre-orders by sharing preview cards and things like that, or talking about how cool the new alternate borders are and things like that, without being overtly, bash people over the head saying, buy this thing from me right now. We got another question here. What are some good ways to get more email addresses from potential customers for email marketing? There's a couple of ways you can do that. Like I said, the giveaways are really, really good. If you want to try and leverage things like that. There are a couple of other tools you can use online, like Gleam.io, to do much more broad giveaways, like give away $100 in store credit, and you get an entry every time you sign up. Something that we've started doing at Channel Fireball is, and this is not necessarily something that all stores are going to do, but we started doing these quizzes that are, who's your commander, who's your best commander, this, what card from Strixhaven best suits you, things like that. And what we're doing is we're genuinely creating very compelling and interesting content to people. And that content is valuable enough that people are willing to fork over their email addresses for it. Is there a general rule for the type of emails that perform well? Pre-releases or newsletters? Does this depend on my audience? It does depend on your audience a lot, to be honest. There's no real, and perform well is even relative. Like there's so many different ways to look at these things. Does your email perform well if it has a high open rate? Yes. Does your email perform well if it has a better click-through rate? Sure. Does your email perform even better if it has a higher conversion rate, people actually buying things? Absolutely. Those are kind of things that you can use to actually track what is more important to you. And obviously sales is the most important thing at the end of the day. But figuring out what your goal is for email marketing campaign is probably the most important. I think Mosh is going to jump in here. I'm going to have a little bit of a powwow. I think I probably should stop sharing screen at that point.
So one of the things that is just true in our marketing team is that, Dennis has certainly taught all of us, and hopefully in any good team, we all learn from each other. And Dennis certainly taught me a ton about marketing. One of the things you really touched on here with the cadence of posts on social media is getting into the algorithm is important. But what helped focus me and what helped focus my understanding of that is, what is our purpose here? And I think that we all want to convert. We're retailers. We want to make sales. We want to get out there and sell products. But when we're doing marketing on social media, part of that cadence is establishing us as an authority. The example you had where it's like, hey, I'm going to repost this Will Wheaton post about this game. What that says to our customer base when we do things like that. And you can see this on another member of our team, Rachel Gillette. She helps us with LinkedIn, and she's reposting all these articles on LinkedIn. We do this in the marketplace group too. That helps provide all of our customers, all of our peers with information so they can then turn to us and say, this is an authority. So you want to be the authority in your area on games, on Flesh and Blood, on Magic, on Pokemon, whatever it is. And that just builds that connection with your customers so that when you do have something to offer sale, it's a no-brainer. Well, of course, yeah. Dennis's Cards is selling this game. Dennis says it's good. I get all my gaming information from Dennis. Boom. That's an easy conversion. And I think that that's what's missing, because sometimes as retailers, I know I get in this trap. I know Sasa's been in this trap where it's like, why are we doing all this? There isn't a conversion here. We're not selling anything right now. But there's an old kind of that old chestnut of in marketing and sales is you're always just selling yourself, right?
Mhm.
And this helps build up that persona. If you're just tuned in to coming to me for information about gaming, about Magic, about Flesh and Blood, when those new sets, oh, we're back to After Dark. When those new sets come out, one, you're still gonna want to come back and turn to me, and two, your instinct, your reflex is just to come back to this spot, to this Facebook group, to this website, because we've established ourselves as an authority on it.
I think it's important as well. It's more important even for a physical store. And like I talked about this with the War Chest. After a couple of months, we stopped calling the War Chest, we started calling it Dave's, because Dave was the guy who owned it. And you get that sense much more when you post about these things that you're actually passionate about. And you got to be careful. If you're a Magic player, you got to throw some love occasionally to Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z and Yu-Gi-Oh and things like MetaZoo or Flesh and Blood or Warhammer, anything like that. And it'll come through that you are passionate about this industry. You are passionate about these games. You are like your customers. And for a lot of companies, you have to fake that, to be honest with you. But we're lucky enough that we're an industry where game store owners are, by and large, I'm going to say north of 95% gamers. You get into it because you're passionate about comic books. You're passionate about, Warhammer, Pokemon, whatever. And the amount of times I've gone to a game store and seen the guy behind the counter hotly debating something with a customer because and you can see that they're passionate about it. They definitely care more about it than the person who makes your coffee in the morning, cares about the coffee they're selling, or the person who has a soap stand at the farmer's market. These are lifestyle brands. These are lifestyle games. And that needs to come across in the way you present yourself on social media, because it is a real strength of our industry. And it's a crime not to leverage it in the way you communicate with your audience.
I think that's hilarious for those of us who grew up at Superstars, which of course is the parent company for Channel Fireball. There was a period of time when we just called it Sassos. Yeah. So that is a real thing. Like, hey, heading over to Sassos, all right. Sean Kim has a question for us for products that generally, that's generally not sought after or desired. What incentives would you apply to help promote a product pre-release and post-release?
So this sounds like a product that is like new or not come out yet, or a product that doesn't have an established audience in your store. This is the kind of thing where you can build that by starting to talk about it, post about it on social media. It is the kind of thing where it might be beneficial, and this is a conversation at the time. It might be beneficial to pull out the wallet and put $150 into paid advertising in your local area in the form of Facebook ads about that product, to let those people know that there is let's say a Flesh and Blood event coming or a Pokemon event coming, things like that. I think a lot of the time, and Masha, you'll probably attest this with Channel Fireball, what we struggle with letting people know about for products that aren't selling well is just letting people know they exist. That's the main thing, is getting the word out. And you can put so much effort into like making sure the product's priced well and stocked well and all that stuff. And but if people don't know about it, they'll never have the opportunity to buy it. So I think the best incentives is probably to get a good run up ahead of time, posting about these things before they come out. And like I said, it is important to try and leverage and diversify those other options. It's also important to know when to cut it. If you've had 4 releases of a game in a row that is not selling in your store, it might be time to look at, ordering less of it or stopping ordering it, and then maybe trying again in a year's time or 6 months time, things like that. I don't know, Masha, is there any, like, what have you?
I think one of the other keys, and we can take a lesson really out of the Channel Fireball playbook, jumping back to what you said, which I think is just so massively important, is tapping into that passion that we have as gamers, right? So for whether it's Magic or Flesh and Blood or Pokemon, is really, really important. There's nothing that's going to market your product, particularly in a smaller retail community. If you're brick and mortar and you're reaching out, to the Santa Clara County area, that's where I'm at now. That's where we want to sell. That's where our walk-in customers are going to come from. We have a university right down the block. We want to find a way to tap into that passion. What we did with Flesh and Blood, right? Before we got anything, and we're working together with James, we sent decks to Luis, to members of our warehouse. I said, try this game. Tell us what you think. And of course, Luis loves the game. So that passion, you don't have to fake it. And as a store owner, if you get into a game because you play that game, all the better. That passion is going to translate through. If you're into a game because some of your customers like it, find a way to channel that passion. What are they bringing? How is that passion expressing itself? Because I think that's super important inside the community, inside that game store retailer community, even when you're Channel Fireball, right? LSV makes so much Flesh and Blood content now. And obviously he's very well known in Magic. Flesh and Blood, nobody knew who he was, but he loved the game. He started playing a ton of it, and that passion comes through. So finding a way, however it is, to channel that passion you have, the reason that you're behind the counter in that retail store 7 days a week for some of us, those product lines, it's going to help you innovate. It's going to help you build communication with the community and get that product out to the people who want it. Everything Dennis said is totally true too, though, because we do struggle with like, hey, we sell Pokemon now, we sell Flesh and Blood now. We're not just Magic, all about, right?
Like you said, it's all about immersing yourself and trying to care about the products you sell. And look, you're gonna have a favorite. Like you're gonna like Magic more than you like Pokemon, or vice versa, things like that. But having not just a working language, but the passion, trying to understand the passion for these different games. When I was, a teenager, we went to a Games Workshop outlet here in Dublin, and we had a Warhammer demo, and we were playing, and the guy was showing us how the game works, and he's rolling dice, and like the orc throws a spear, and the guy turns to me and he goes, the orc spear soars over your soldier and it just grazes his arm, but he gets up and he beats his chest and he plans to go on fighting and wipes the sweat out of his eyes. And 13-year-old Dennis and his friends, we were blown away, man. I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. This is amazing. Spent every dime of my allowance on Fantasy Warhammer at the time, brought it all home. We get sitting in my buddy's, backyard, throwing dice, and I'm like, oh, your guy misses. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool if the narrator came from the store to sell us on this. And that passion is infectious. And like I said, you're not going to be as entrenched in all the different aspects of your store as you are in some of them. But if you are worried about an upcoming like Flesh and Blood release or a Pokemon release, get into it. Try and figure out why the people that play that game play it. What are they looking for? What experience they're looking for? And then you can start thinking about who those people are and how you can reach them. All of marketing and marketing theory and the psychology behind it is all about taking a step back and understanding why people do the things they do and how you can communicate those things to them.
I think one of the key things you've touched on, which is important, and we know this as Magic players, is when you are immersed, you can speak the language, right? You can sometimes that language changes and you're talking about type 2 and converted mana cost. That happens, but people still know what you're talking about. And gamers, and really the wider kind of one of the huge marketing lessons we have now in this age of social media is authenticity is important, and our audience, particularly Gen Z, they can spot the fakes. And it's super, super important that you get that authenticity out, that you speak the language, that you engage with communities in the way that they want to be engaged, in the language and tone and cadence that they like to be and expect to be engaged in, because otherwise they'll kind of suss you out as being not genuine. And that can be very, very fatal. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's this temptation, and that's kind of why I focused this talk on this. There's temptation nowadays to base all marketing on raw data. It's kind of sexier to use big data and algorithms and all these attribution models to figure out what you should be doing, where you should be spending your marketing dollars. But if you're a store that doesn't have thousands of customers a month, you have a couple hundred customers a month or a couple dozen customers a month, you can still get really far by taking some of the things we've done here, doing a little bit of reading online and sitting down with a pen and paper and thinking about your products, thinking about your customers and why they do the things they do. You're not going to be, sitting with these millions of data points at hand, trying to, pluck strings and figure out exactly what you want to do. But you can pour yourself a bourbon at 2 p.m. and pretend you're Don Draper and try and think about it that way. And that is just as effective, especially for smaller businesses, I promise you.
Ooh, we got another question here. Just want to say, Isaac, this is Isaac again, our friend in Australia. Just want to say that presentation was awesome. So much valuable information. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's very sweet.
We don't normally treat Dennis that way in the marketing team, but I'll allow it this time, Dennis.
All I need, it turns out, to get Mashi to be nicer to me is basically like witnesses. It turns out I wasn't aware that was the dynamic we had, but if that's what needs to be happening, Mashi, I think I'd like to invite a couple dozen extra games for us to our stand-ups, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, all of our meetings, everyone's invited to our marketing meetings every morning. Boy, they'd be really, really interesting meetings. So, any final thoughts here, Dennis, as we wrap?
Jim asks, will this be available to view again at a later time? I believe it is being recorded. It'll be up on the YouTube channel. I'm not. We'll email everybody if you got into this event by signing up from the email. If you haven't, you can go to lgscon.com and give us your email now, and you'll get it that way. You'll also get just the actual slide deck, so you can peruse through it at your own speed, rather than having me with my rapid fire Irish cadence flying through the whole thing at breakneck pace.
We'll definitely have videos. We'll definitely have a YouTube video posted. So make sure that you fill out that form because we'll email the link out after the event.
That's all I want to talk about. Mashi, I am very, and I say this, it would be tempted to say this without meaning it, but I generally do mean this. I am very excited about the next speaker we have coming up.
Absolutely. This is, it's funny. John Sasso was talking about opportunity and launching a game. Can you imagine launching a CCG, kind of right during all this pandemic lockdown? But yes, we do have Michael Waddell. He launched MetaZoo in March. I think the Kickstarter was in March, and it was pretty unbelievable. The reception to the Kickstarter has been, I think, beyond anyone's expectation. I'm sure Michael himself was pretty shocked, but very, very interesting to meet a new, to speak to someone who's found so much success in Kickstarter. First edition's coming out this summer, so it's full steam ahead for MetaZoo. Very, very, and this is where you see that passion, right? Our passion drove us to retail and work on this side of it. Michael's passion drove him to design a game. He loved Pokemon. He played Magic, came up with MetaZoo, and MetaZoo has, have you seen a lot of the MetaZoo cards? Then it's like break the fourth wall, where it's like, is it rain? You get a bonus if it's raining outside. You get a bonus depending on how many lights are above you. So it brings that card game into the real world. Definitely. I mean, honestly, like if the way I've been describing it to others who are less familiar with the IP is it's kind of flavors of Pokemon, but because of the collectibility,
the art style, especially, it's a cryptid card game. So things like Chupacabras, Bigfoots, all that sort of stuff. But the art style is very much early Pokemon, the sort of little like smudgy sort of watercolor look to it.
Yep.
And if you're a game store that has not heard about MetaZoo, I promise you have just not heard about MetaZoo yet, because it is huge. It is, and this is definitely going to be, it is 100% the next big thing. And I'm very, very excited to have Michael here to talk a little bit about how he got to where he is today.
So we'll be right back with Michael Waddell, the founder of MetaZoo.
Thanks, everybody.